Record. Hey, it's Kate Stillman with yogahealer.com, and we're doing this workshop on manifesting your personal and professional goals on time. And we're looking at the year ahead of where we are now and looking forward. So I'm going to go into some slides, and so we have the same shared screen here. For me, a lot of this it comes from having spent the first part of my adult life in Ayurveda and yoga, and just really looking at how do we evolve on a personal awareness level. And then the second part of my adult life, spent a lot more time, invested a lot more time understanding business strategy and how companies hit goals on time. So it's fascinating, this path of enlightenment on one side and this path of more on the fiscal and team growth on the other side. And that's really what I'm going to share with you today is how to hit goals, and then how to deal with the time component of that as well. So if you don't have a pen and paper, you're going to want to get that. If you have colored pens, all the better. Bring art to the table, bring your own visual thinking. For those who don't know me, I started yogahealer.com in 2001 and Yogi Detox in 2002. I started teaching the online Living Ayurveda course in 2007. Yoga Health Coaching, which is our professional wellness pro branch of Yoga Healer, that started in 2012, and now we have yoga health coaches around the world. I wrote the book Body Thrive, which is on the 10 habits of Ayurveda and yoga in 2014. Master Review's coming out this next March in 2020. And we started Awake Living, which is our Dharma course in 2016. And all of those courses, it's wild to look at that list, but like they're all going strong in 2019. And so the things that I create last and they grow. So in terms of hitting goals on time, I speak from a place of having actually done quite a lot in my professional career and while raising a family, which I'll get into in a bit. So when people ask me what I do, it's, for the most part, I teach through dynamic group courses, and that's how I help people actually evolve more rapidly. Everything I do is based in Ayurveda on the elemental level, and we'll get into that in a bit of looking at these elements of space and air, fire, water, and earth, and how they play into leadership and into goal setting and hitting goals on time. So even that leadership, I always tie back to the 5 elements of Ayurveda. I teach people how to evolve their habits and the basics of habit evolution, which you can apply to anything. We'll get into that a little bit later in the call when we look at how to actually shape time. How you hit goals has everything to do with how you shape the field of time. And then I help people evolve their lifestyle and career evolution. And that a lot of that has to do in these courses. Awake Living, we look specifically at strategy. So a lot of the strategy I'm going to teach today comes from Awake Living. The book that corresponds with Awake Living is Master Review, and that comes out in March. So people that want to be coached by me, they come into a course, they come into yoga health coaching or Body Thrive or Awake Living, unless they want to study Ayurveda, in which case they go into Living Ayurveda course. So I just wanted to give you guys, just those who don't know me, this is the world of me, and this is where the world of this comes from. This is a picture taken a long time ago. I was actually looking at this, realizing that I can look at my past and goal setting a lot by business growth and personal growth. So I was checking out these boots I'm wearing in this, and I remember when I bought those boots, I was in Seattle, and I was celebrating that I was with my mastermind group at the time, and I was celebrating that Yoga Healer had hit $500,000 in revenue. And I bought those boots kind of as like a celebration of that. And then in the years, Indy's only what, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 in that picture. So now she's 11, and Yoga Healer's more than doubled since that. So it's fun to see. And I just want you guys to know that, like, I speak from a place of having done a lot and do a lot, and having a very much of a lifestyle driven experience, because to me that it's not just about that stuff. It's about who we are and who we want to be. So I want you to dream big for your life. This is where I live. When we go to Mexico, we have a condo. Actually, we have 2 condos in Mexico. One we have as a rental and the other we own. And a lot of this is due to my success and my drive and ambition and hitting goals on time. So this little town is surrounded by 5 surf breaks, which brought us to Punta Mita, and we spent a lot of time there in the winter. I don't just work all the time. I love being outdoors and mountain biking. This is my all boy plus me mountain bike posse. This is just in our backyard up in the Tetons. This is the view from my house, looking at the sunrise. And we spend a lot of time just outside doing stuff. This is us going down we whitewater paddleboarded 240 miles of rivers in Idaho. That was a group shot of one of those trips. And I also have professional goals in terms of like doing things and meeting people. So this is Tammy Simon, who's another entrepreneur, founder of Sounds True, who's the publisher I work with. So I just want to show, like, it's not just about hitting one part of goals. It's like lifestyle goals. For us, I wanted my child to be bilingual. So that's why we ended up in Mexico. We also realized if we didn't learn how to get really good at surfing early enough, that was never going to happen. And so we decided to make choices and align our life in terms of bigger dreams. And that's really what I want for you, is you can design your body and your income and your life. And it's going to require some very good strategy. And that's what we're going to get into today, is how do you set the right goals for yourself, so you're not setting somebody else's goals. Sometimes we set goals. I know with Yoga Healer, I got confused on this at different phases of like why I was growing the company, or even why I was growing income. And sometimes we set goals that, 3 layers deep in our subconscious are to impress somebody else, or they're someone else's dreams. There are mother's dreams, or our father's dreams, or our grandparents' dream for ourselves. So as we go through this workshop today, I want you to start to look at, what are your goals, like for you to live the most fulfilling next chapter of your life, and that set you up for the next phase of life, so that the phase after that one is even more aligned than the phase that you're going into right now. And when we strategically do that, this is a lot of what we do in our Awake Living courses, teach this methodology. It takes a little while to get it, but when we do it consistently, what happens is you guessed it, manifest your personal and professional goals on time, which is the big idea. Okay, so some of the biggest mistakes I see in goal planning in general is people have the wrong goal. I just spoke to that briefly, where you're simply aiming towards somebody else's target, or the wrong target. And you can see this sometimes in other people. Sometimes people sacrifice lifestyle for income or money. Other people sacrifice income for lifestyle. Getting clear of all of the ands in your goal, like I want this and I want that, is really important, because that's going to guide your strategy. So the more clear you are as I'm talking, and you're starting to write down a bit about like what exactly are your goals, you want to look for this. Is it that I want this and that? I want to earn this much while working this many hours. I want to, climb this mountain while, also, keeping my day job. And, whatever it is for you, like you want to look at having the right goals that are particular to you, and without sacrificing some of the things that are actually also part of your bigger picture of what's important. Let me just I just want to open, where did it go? I sometimes can lose my chat box, and I just want to see if anyone has, as we're going through this, if anyone has questions. Oh, here we go. You can type them in the chat, because I talk fast and a lot, so it's good to ask questions as we go. All right, the other big thing, you have the wrong strategy. This is really where we'll spend the second half of this call, is really looking at strategy. I find strategy is where people need the most help, especially a lot of us are coming from what I call new age mentality, which is like, dream it and it will become real. And some of us have had some success with that, and some of us have had some failure with that as well. And failure is okay. First attempts in learning, no problem there. But really looking at, like, when you look at the bigger the company you have, the more money they put into strategy, which is not random. It's looking at the how you're going to get there matters as much as where you're aiming to go. So not having a strategy at all, or having like wishful thinking strategy, as I call it, that's a subpar strategy for bigger goals. It might work for smaller goals, but usually for bigger goals, that needs to be aided by strategic thinking, which we'll get into. And it's a big part of what we do in Awake Living because it takes a while to learn. It's not easy. It's a disciplined thinking procedure. And that's like, if you think of a medical procedure, like one step goes before the other step. And that's what good strategy is really built from. Okay, so strategies are based on a proven system. Usually that takes guidance. So having a guide to get to the next level. If you're trying to do something on your own, like good luck. More and more, I never go it alone. I always have a guide who's already gone to where I'm trying to go. There's always someone who's gone to where you're trying to go. And if you don't think so, I think that's also delusional thinking. So we talked about wishful thinking. There's also delusional thinking. Thinking that you can get there faster on your own, I put that in the category unequivocally of delusional thinking. All right, so having support, having people who are also trying to go in that direction, I'd say that's also huge. So even in goal planning, you can build that in. Hey, oh, thank you, Stacy. You can build that right into the strategy, and that is just going to really very greatly increase your chances of getting to that goal. And I can't tell you how many times, and again, I wish I had figured that one out a little earlier in my journey. All right, so building your plan on limiting knowledge and past experience. Huge mistake in goal planning. If you haven't achieved a goal already, assume you have something to learn. And assume you don't even know a tenth of it, of what you need to learn. That is safe, like that is good strategy. But the big mistake is people think they already have what it takes. In my experience, you have exactly what it took to get right here, right now. And high fives or high tens to that, like awesome, you got here, and that's worth celebrating. That's why I buy the boots, right? Wherever you're at, if you put any sort of intention and goal planning and strategy behind that, and you took action on that, then you got somewhere you hadn't been before, and that's awesome. But if you're having a future that's bigger than your past, and we're going to get to that in just a minute, that means that you can't just rely on past knowledge, and you can't just rely on past experience. All right, so people build essentially, those are all the things people build the wrong plan. You know, a lot of this stuff, like I didn't understand this before I started studying it, and before I was, guided by a mentor and guru through this, and worked with the process with a support group around it. And I was like, oh, okay, that's how people have a bigger future than their past. That's how people achieve bigger life dreams. And not everybody does. The more successful I become, the more, basically the smaller the playing field, right? There's fewer and fewer people at the top is kind of how it goes. So a lot of people are settling for things, and their lives aren't bigger than their past. But what we're here in many ways to do is like have a bigger life, like have a vision that's much bigger than where you've gone in the past, and start to think of like, what is your vision for a bigger life? Before I owned 2 condos in Mexico, I didn't, right? I didn't. Before I had a team of 10 people working for me, like I didn't. Before I built, this incredible fancy house with my husband, like I didn't have this. And this, this thing of dreaming big is something that I find that most successful entrepreneurs do and have done for a long time. And a lot of other people in life, they settle, or they talk to people who are like, oh, you can't do that because. So in the circles that I run in, and in the circles that I create at Yoga Healer in our courses, is I believe, and we believe that your future should be bigger than your past. That your vision for a bigger life, that actually matters. And that's why I guide people to thrive, and then I guide them into their potential. And the thrive part, the body part, comes first. So if a lot of your goals are hung up in that you don't have enough energy, and you're, if you're carrying too much weight, or if you're not sleeping, these are big things to dial in and to actually focus on in the next phase of your life, is dialing in yourself. Okay, so what I find, this is an image from Master of You, from the book that's coming out. That's the book behind the Awake Living course. Not available yet, though you can pre-order. This is what most people's life is like. It's like there's a buried dream. Like the deeper dream for their life is they're like standing on top of it, but it's not visible, right? They sense it wherever they go. It's right underneath them, but it's not visible. And it's because there's so much other stuff. There's what's on our calendar. There's the always clicking, ticking clock. There's all the other people we're taking care of. There's the there's the phone. The phone is now taking up, it's crazy, guys. The stats now, over 3 hours a day per conscientious user. These are users that are actually measuring their time on their phone. 3 hours a day are going into cell phone use now. So if we look at what happens is there's this age of distraction where everything on the surface is getting the majority of the time. And then the deeper dream gets even more buried, right? It gets pushed even further away, and soon we're just kind of keeping up. And in the keeping up thing, we don't have as much control of our calendar. We don't have as much control of our time. And we're not being strategic in how we're using either of those two tools. And that's why a deeper dream here, a dharmic dream or a life of purpose, without good strategy, I'm just saying that's basically a pipe dream. And a pipe dream is just something where it's like, you know, it's never going to actually happen. And what we're here to do is actually make stuff happen. This is another image from Master of You. Is this whole idea of like being on top of life. When we're on top of life, we're on top of our dharma, we're on top of our desires, we're plugged into our dreams, and we're using that to actually fuel our life forward. More and more, what I sense is that people are getting stuck where it feels like life is on top of them, where they don't have control of their time, meaning they aren't using their time in the way that is actually pointing towards their deeper dream and pointing towards a fulfilling day simultaneously. And that actually doesn't end well. Like that over time is getting worse for people statistically as a global culture. And people are just more overwhelmed, more busy, more overscheduled, have less time for self-care, exercising less, spending less time in quality conversations, spending less time nourishing themselves and eating quality foods. So the results of the life on top of you can be a bit disastrous. So this idea of a bigger and better life, take a moment now and journal about like, what is your brighter life? What is your bigger life? What is your even better life? And if you're someone like me and you're like, things are amazing, like things are great, like great. But if your future's continually bigger and better and brighter than your past, then don't hold back. It means you have all the more skill, tools, resources, strengths, assets, and people to leverage into an even bigger, brighter, greater future. Now, as you're writing, use different colors, draw pictures, and don't self-edit. Like, don't write things down that you're like, oh, that's not going to look good on paper, or something that you might be ashamed of. I was initially, because of coming from the yoga and Ayurveda world, there wasn't a lot of, most of my colleagues were not very financially ambitious. It wasn't like a big thing that like people wouldn't get together. They'd like get together and talk about like how to clarify butter, but not necessarily how to clarify hitting the next income target. But that's the conversation I was really interested in. And I was a bit ashamed of that for a long time. Finally, I found the right group of people to talk about that with. And they weren't in the health and wellness field. They were in small business, basically small business growth type groups, where I learned that that was totally normal conversation for entrepreneurs. That's when I learned I was an entrepreneur. So what does that look like? And even if there's a little shame or if there's a little hesitation, write it down. Like, just don't worry about it, but get it out there. Let it be on paper. Often when we write down our goals, we think we can't do that. There's no way in hell, and it feels like a pipe dream. That's good to write down too right now. Like, we're not working on the strategy part right now. I'm just trying to get you clear on what is a bigger and better life. And this image here of, this is another one from Master of You. This is the 5 elements in these 5 domains. So the domain of home, what is an even better, brighter, bigger life for you at home? What is it in your body? So space to earth element. What is an even better body? What is an even brighter body or mind? You can include spirit in the body part, body, mind, spirit. Like, what does that look like in the next year of your life? Where are you aiming? Fire is ambition. Some of us have a lot of ambition. I know in the beginning when Sandy said life is asking me to level up, I think many of us feel that way now. I think in the current socio-political global climate where a lot of us are like, I need to be the change I want to see in the world, like there can be this sense of like the calling, a calling to action, a calling to wanting to make the world a better place. A lot of legacy, like if you want to leave a legacy of like when you're on your deathbed and you're like, what did I do? How will I be remembered? This is all part of fire element of ambition. Like what is your dharma? What is your life purpose guiding you towards in a bigger way, in a brighter way in this next phase? And sometimes fire or ambition, sometimes it could scare us. And part of the reason it's scary is because it will demand even greater growth, and growth will require even greater depth. That whole idea of like, you'll have to dig a little deeper in yourself. You'll have to live life from a place of greater depth. That part is real, and some part of ourself knows that the greater the ambition, the more we're going to need to grow, the more depth we're going to need to uncover within ourselves. All right, some of us have desires for a bigger, better, brighter life in terms of our time, what kind of control we have over our time, how much we can expand the field of time, right? Do we feel like we're in a rush, or do we feel like we have all the time in the world? Can we bend time? Can we shape shift time? Can we expand time? Can we align in the field of time? And then water element or flow. Flow, you can also, we actually went back and forth about 25 times on this. You can also put integrity in the water domain. How much integrity, how much flow? There's certain places some of us might be really out of alignment with integrity. For some of us, it's financial and how we're planning, whatever, there's financial security, safety net, etc. For others of us, it has to do with body integrity. For some of us, it's spiritual integrity. I was recently talking with someone who has really great career skills in particular in her profession, but isn't on fire about how she's using that to impact the kind of people that she wants to impact, which are small business owners. And when we don't pay attention to that, when we're just like keep doing the same kind of work and it's not that fulfilling, that is an integrity issue over time, where we're out of integrity with our deeper dharma. And that's where that goes to water element. Water and fire are opposites, so growth requires depth. That's also in this image up here of the spiral on its side. That rejuvenation, that depth side is required for growth. All right, so by now you should have a few things written down about it. What do you deeply desire to experience in the next phase of your life, in your body, in your work, in your calendar, in your home? And so what we'll do now is we'll get a bit into this version of yourself that is beyond your wildest dreams, or the next version of yourself in your wildest dreams. It is so important to dream bigger than you normally do, because in the deeper dream there's this, like what yogis would say is like, that's the experience of svatantriya, of the complete freedom of consciousness to create. It's very aligned to then the energy of creation, which is Shakti. So there's a limitlessness to our consciousness. And so in this phase, before you get to strategy, you want to just look at like, really, what is the bigger, broader directions of life that I want to experience? And going there. When I was in my early 20s, I decided to study Ayurveda. I decided like, I just really had to understand this deep wisdom tradition. And in my wildest dreams, like I really knew Ayurveda. Like I could really speak from the depth of the the tradition and the teachings, that I had embodied the teachings. And in my early 20s, that was so far from my reality. It was so distant. I was raised like on the standard American diet with allopathic medicine, in the whole pain cave of that experience. I had a lot of like basically body shaming, body hatred, like, the typical like middle class American girl issues type of a thing. And so deeply, deeply, deeply down, I wanted that deep wisdom. So what your wildest dream is so unique to you. And it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. Like all my friends that became lawyers and bankers and doctors, they were like, what are you doing? What? Like Ayurveda. You haven't heard of it? It was not yet a buzzword. All right, so we're gonna get into strategy in just a minute. And I just wanna say that, for a lot of what we do at Yoga Healer, people wonder like how to get into courses. The easiest way is just to talk to us, so you can have a free Awaken Your Dream conversation. The way to do that is just fill out a form at yogahealer.com/dream. And then you can talk to someone. We have courses starting in the next week or so. Body Thrive, Yoga Health Coaching, and Awake Living are all starting on November 7th. So if you're wondering how I can coach you there, obviously it's going to take more than an hour webinar, but the best thing to do is to fill out a form at yogahealer.com/dream and have a deep dive conversation with someone, so they can, it's actually amazing when you get listened to really get clear on where it is that you want to go. So what we're going to do next is we're going to start to lay the track for the next chapter of your life with this strategic Dharma alignment. And we're going to do this through this process where you're going to own your current challenges with full awareness. Now, part of this is when you look at what you wrote down in terms of your deeper dream, like what are some of the challenges that arise in your awareness to like how you're going to make that happen. So this is a big part of the strategic thinking process, is where you get it all out on paper. Like anything that's happening in your subconscious mind, you're trying to bring it to the surface of your conscious mind. So what are the challenges? What are your current challenges? And owning those with your full awareness. Then what we'll do is we'll identify your key strengths to evolve into who you want to become next. There's certain things that you bring to the table. There's these key strengths, and they are like keys, and they unlock part of the strategy in going forward. Then what we're going to do is we're going to digest some of the lessons learned from the last phase of your growth. So we're going to look back, and I'm kind of packing in a big chunk of strategy into a short period of time. But you'll have the replay on this, and it's good to take actually a day with this and really look at things on a very deep level. But we'll do it on a fairly surfacey level today. Then what we'll do is we'll create simple, effective strategies to leverage the insights from your current challenges, because there's certain things that you're challenged by right now that actually will point the direction to the best strategies. And this is where, when those challenges remain in your subconscious mind, when you don't actually deal directly with them, that they just undermine the goal. So unless they're conscious, they undermine the goal. When they become conscious, they actually become part of the strategy. And that should make you really excited. At least it makes me really excited. Okay, so then what you'll do is after that is you'll cultivate the micro habits to help you get there. And with that, you'll be more efficient with your time. And when you're more efficient with your time, it means you have more free time. And this is where, when you see like really successful people, they actually have a ton of time, right? Why? Because they have really good strategy that they've put into action. Okay, and all that obviously more time helps you take better care of yourself. So this is the deal. What we want to do here is increasingly fall in love with our life and have increasing capacity for personal and professional lifestyle design. So all of this that we're going to get into in this next phase is how to continually do this. I'm going to keep emphasizing, like we do in the Awake Living course, that this is a discipline. This is a practice. Lifestyle design is not random. I don't randomly have a successful business. I don't randomly have the kind of lifestyle I want to have. I don't randomly have a fairly spacious schedule. I don't randomly have afternoons with my kid to go play soccer every day, right? It's all strategic. And that's really what we want, is we want to understand that our capacity to have the life we want personally and professionally, that should improve. That should improve quarter after quarter. Okay, and so the way that this is different is we're effectively going on this quest for our Dharma. We've already started to uncover what we've wanted, and then we get to form good strategy in alignment with this. This is an image from Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and what it's showing here is on one axis you have skill, and on the other axis you have challenge. When you are increasing skill and challenge in each chapter of your life, that leads to flow. And Mihaly wrote a book called Flow. He has written a ton on the concept of experiencing flow, and both personally and then professionally in the workplace, et cetera, how people can experience flow in work. And what he finds is that it happens when you're focused. It happens when you're undistracted. But it also happens when the demand for your skill is met by the demand of the challenge. Or said another way, it's met when the demand of the challenge is met by the demand for skill in ever increasing amounts of both. So if your challenge, if you look at your deeper dreams and your challenge is so much bigger than your skill level, you're not going to experience flow. You'll experience anxiety. If their challenge, if your goal isn't big enough and you have the skills to get there, you'll experience boredom. So higher skill, lower challenge equals boredom, higher challenge, lower skill equals anxiety. Neither of those is flow. Flow has happened when you are slowly increasing skills to meet the ever-increasing challenge. This is so worth noting, because most people in my circles and most people in Awake Living, their challenge is greater than their skill level. So then what we need to do is build strategy in how to up the skill to meet the challenge. Does that make sense? You guys can comment. When you start to understand this stuff and how it applies to your unique life goals, it starts to like click in and make all the difference. Okay, so if we look at issues in terms of aligning to Dharma, the biggest issues are people don't review their lessons learned, which we'll do in a minute. People don't investigate the challenges or critical issues, which I just mentioned. They don't actually look at how is challenge bigger than skill. They don't build a good strategy, including habit building. What are the small habits that you need to build to increase the skill? And they don't build good strategy around relationship building. The whole thing with that is you might not have the skills, but certain people might have the skills. So if you're in a relationship to people that have those skills, then those skills become your skills. And that is sick. That's when you get sick skills, is you just use everybody else's skills. All right, and so the other biggest mistake, which I've already mentioned, but is still worth noting, because I find I can't say this enough, is you just can't stay in the realm of the dreamer. You have to become an actualizer. You have to be someone who's looking for, how do I increase my skill to meet the challenge? All right, and so in that way, what happens is we have a quest. We have a quest for aligned action. And we're going to get into the questions that are behind the quest in just a moment. The whole idea with a quest, and this is where manifesting really kicks in, is when you start to ask better questions of your own brain, of your own mind, of the more intelligent people in your life, what happens is you start to open your neural pathways. You start to actually be able to receive some of the skill to help you meet the challenge. So this whole idea of having good questions is really where we're gonna go next. I would like you to reflect on these and just take a moment of what are your key accomplishments this far in your life. Before, when I said you can take a day with this workshop, it's part of it. And in Awake Living, we do this day of this, we do this quarterly, where you take time to see like what are now accomplishments. Because on a growth path, each quarter you should have significant accomplishments. For now, just look at like when you look back over your life, like what are the big what are the big key things you've accomplished? For those of you who are doing this quarterly with us, like what is it in the past quarter? It's not random. That strategy building always starts with the positive. Whenever you want to grow, you always start with the positive. Next question is, what are my key lessons learned from the last phase of your life, from the last phase of your growth? The things with lessons learned is you never want to have to learn them again. So these are the ones you're like, okay, thank you, universe. Thank you, Dharma, for presenting this growth opportunity. I learned a lesson, and I'd like to incorporate that into a strength. So anything that you learned that you're like, I don't want to have to learn that one again. Next question. What critical issues or current challenges are on your plate right now? And then which of these issues have a long history or deep roots? So often we have tendencies that become part of our personalities. And we just assume that like that's how we are, that's the way we are. Like when you hear it, it's so easy to hear it in other people of like, oh, I'm just not good with money, or oh, I'm just not that ambitious, or oh, I just like to, you know, keep my life at a level of, it's easy to control. And what you can often hear in that is like, it'll be out of sync with the dream. It'll be out of sync with the deeper dream or what the next level of Dharma is. So Dharma requires a certain level of plasticity of character. And if we look at Svatantria, it means like you're completely free. You're free to, flex and bend your personality depending on what Dharma is calling for in this phase of your life, what your purpose is, what your deeper dream is in this next phase of your life, which will require new skills. So when you look at any current challenges, this question of like, how long or deep is this rooted? If it's like, oh, I'm just not that, I just don't like to deal with, for me, historically, here's an example. It's like on the financial and accounting side, I'm really good at making money. I wasn't as good at like actually looking at how things would add up over time and how to actually reinvest that money smartly in the company. And I didn't even know it was an issue. All I just knew was like, oh, I just don't spend as much time in like QuickBooks as the typical CEO, right? In terms of like looking at things over time, looking at growth projections, budgets, et cetera. So then I look at like, what's the history of that? Like, oh, my mom was totally checked out in terms of money. My dad kept money behind closed doors. Those are long or deeper issues. If I don't uncover them now, again, this is where the subconscious becomes the conscious, they can short circuit my ability to hit my next level of goals. Some of us have our own, we want to increase our income or the revenue if we're self-employed, but like we have certain issues around selling. Like we're not that good with sales, or we might have issues with, I was working with someone the other day who wants to make more money, but needs to present to her boss where she can add more value. And she hasn't put time, thought, energy, effort into doing that. So she's been in a pattern of waiting. So she had this issue around, well, I'll wait until someone gives me a raise. Well, people that aggressively get raises, year over year, they consistently provide more and more value to the company. They prove their value, they prove their worth, and they demonstrate where they can offer more value, and then they're remunerated for that added value that they're bringing. But again, if someone has an issue with money, then it's going to show up in all sorts of ways, shapes, or forms. And, whether they're talking money or health, et cetera, it's just, you need to look at that. Okay, the next question is, what skills, knowledge, relationships, assets, or habits would help you become the person who's attained the goals that you've set out for yourself? What skills, knowledge, relationships, assets? And then another way of saying this is what are the strengths that you bring to the table? So for me, over time, I can look at different strengths I have with Ayurveda or yoga or philosophy, business skills, etc. Relationships more and more for many of us become key assets. I know this person, I know that person, I can call this person with these skills, I'm married to a person with these skills, I've had a coach with these skills, they know this network, etc. So relationships are really key. If someone has already done it, right, and you know that person, that's a person to note, because you can build, that's how we're going to build strategy. Assets, for some of us, we have financial assets. Others of us have assets in terms of land, access to certain places, people, things. You can use assets in all different ways of applying them to strategy. And then what habits? Like some of us have really good fiscal habits. Some of us have really good health habits. Some of us have very good relationship habits or relationship hygiene. Some of us have really good habits in terms of just household and nourishment, sleep habits. What habits are there? Because it's good to note these. I find more and more our habits are either working for our goals or our habits are working against our goals. And identifying the specific habits that we have already that are working towards our goals is super helpful. Identifying any habits that are working against our goals is also really helpful, and that'll show up in the critical issues or the critical weaknesses in getting to the goals. So ask yourself that as well, is where are you, like, what are the big weaknesses in terms of getting to the goal? Those are part of those critical issues, critical challenges. All right, and then next we're going to ask if my future self, so the future self is the part of you that's actually already achieved the goals, the person that's already manifest the goals, that future self. If they reverse engineer the plan from where you are right now, what is that going to look like? And part of what we want to know is, like, what are some of the obvious stages or obvious milestones? How will you know if you're on the right track? Because it's not like with a bigger goal, all of a sudden you get there. Usually you get here and then you get there and then you get there. So identifying what are some of the key milestones. How you'll know you're on the right track. And again, we're just doing this in broad strokes now. It's more important for us to get in this training today is that you can create strategy to hit your goals, that it's not random how you get there. And the more time you put into strategy, the better before you actually take action. And what this does is it helps improve your thinking. So to move forward, the way that the person who has achieved the goals that you've set out for yourself, the way that that identity evolution, the way that that person uses time is different than how you currently use your time. And so what you want to just at least start to picture now is, in the field of time, what do you want your calendar to look like? And if you just want to sketch out a calendar and how much time you would have, and what you would be doing with that time, that starts to, again, give you even more fodder to then go back to those earlier questions of, like, what challenges arise between getting from this calendar that you're in right now to that calendar that your goal achieved future identity already has. So what you've done so far is you've gotten more clear on what you're bringing to the table in terms of the goal and in terms of the challenge. And in the next part of strategy, what you do is you form a strategic question. This is where we get from that place of going on a quest, right? Our quest for aligned action, by forming a question. And there's no coincidence that quest and question are the same root. So what we do now is we look at your challenge. You want to really identify, like, what is the biggest challenge you have, or what are the biggest challenges? And you can choose up to 3, depending on how complex the goal is. What are the biggest challenges or critical issues that you have to get to that goal? And how can you combine that or interlace that with one of your strengths or one of your assets or one of your lessons learned? Or if you go back to that question around, what are the key, where was it? Skills, knowledge, relationship, assets, or habits. And I'm going to give you an example of this because this gets a little tricky, but again, with discipline and practice, this is how we form good strategies to hit goals on time. Is we turn the quest into a question. We interlace like the biggest, baddest challenges or critical issues that we can identify. We're trying to make all the stuff that could sabotage us in the future and make us bury that dream again, right? Remember the buried dream picture where, like, all of a sudden life is on top of us instead of us being on top of life, and where we're just caught up in the whirlwind and not living the deeper dream. When that happens, it's because we didn't actually get to the root of the challenges or critical issues. We didn't make the subconscious conscious. By taking time to do that, what happens is we can marry that to a strength or a lesson learned or an opportunity. We can marry that to a skill, an asset, or relationship. So here's an example of this. So the critical issue or challenge, this is an example of having too much on my plate, hard to prioritize actions and say no to what isn't essential to hit my goal. Marrying that or interlacing that with a strength is I have a strength in automating habits with exercise, with meditation, and with bedtime. So I know how to automate habits. So if I marry that issue with that strength, what I get to is how do I leverage my regular habits to live by my ideal calendar in the next year? Work less, earn more. So that was the goal, work less, earn more. It could be specific, increase income 10% while reducing number of hours worked by 15%, something like that. How do I leverage my regular habits to do that? So now I have a good question. Now, if I ask myself that question all the time, earnestly, not pretending to know the answer, my mind will actually generate a lot of really good ideas, as will your mind. So now this forms a strategy. I'm going to show you how we did that. So we paired a strength with a lesson learned or an opportunity with a current challenge. And what the strategy is, I'm going to maximize my ability to build new habits to turn my current calendar into my ideal calendar, work less, earn more. So I'm taking those habits and now I'm working on my calendar with those habits. It's just a different domain to work on with habits. So then I'm going to look for, and I know I'm kind of blowing through this, you guys, this takes us this is a big chunk of awake living. It takes us a lot of time to actually automate this as strategy, but this is how we help our people hit their goals on time, year over year over year. How will you know you've succeeded? How will you know you've hit your goal? What will be the evidence of your evolution? So these are ways of just breaking that down more into specifics. So for me, it would time block personal rejuvenation or indie activities after 3 p.m. Do what's on my calendar 90% of the time, meaning if it's showing up on my calendar, it happened. It got done 90% of the time. And then evaluating my calendar using the 80-20 rule, meaning like 80% of the stuff on your calendar gets you 20% of the results towards your goal. 20% also gets you 80%. So evaluating that. And then having a weekly exercise to reduce unnecessary work by 50%, actually evaluating and spending time to look at that. So what happens is we're looking at, again, from the quest, marrying a challenge with a strength, then turning that into a question, then forming a strategy around it, then looking at how would I know I was successful? I know I'll be successful on the way to that goal if these three things are happening. And so when we break it down to that granular, we start to be able to identify really specific things. And then from there, we can then get into specific micro habits to support that strategy. So my micro habits here, I could just start with Wednesdays and time block Wednesdays, right? Just start with one day. If I can't do it every day, I could start with one day. I could have the habit weekly of starting and ending my week with that, using that 80-20 rule. It only needs to make sense to you guys. That makes sense to me. To reduce unnecessary activity. And then when someone asks me for a meeting or an activity, I can add it to my potential list and only add it to my calendar when I'm sure I'll commit to it. Sorry, I have a little scratch in my throat. Okay, so again, this whole thing that we did helps you learn how to use strategy to design the experience that you want. Goal setting, if we go back to just what we're here to do, so manifesting personal and professional goals on time, it's not random and people get better at it. It is a skill in itself. What we got into today is a lot of the strategy to get from the place of like too busy on top of your dream to what does it look like when you're actually standing on top of your dream and living your life. We looked at what does it look like when your future is bigger than your past. So this is the identity evolution spiral where each phase of your life should have growth and depth. You should be aiming for more growth and more rejuvenation in each phase of your life. So then we packed into the strategy, right? We really looked at how do you look at your strengths and weaknesses, your opportunities, threats? How do you increase your skill to meet ever increasing challenges? We looked at the quest for aligned action. We asked ourselves specific questions around accomplishments, around lessons learned, around current challenges, around the issues behind those challenges, around the assets, the skills that we bring to the challenge, and then forming those into a strategic question, marrying the challenge with a strength or with a lesson learned, and then turning that into very actionable strategy down to the micro habit level. And that's more or less how it happens. I mean, I know I crammed a lot in here today. We help people do this for real in the Awake Living course. And so if you want to have a conversation about your dream with us, we can see if we can help you manifest it at yogahealer.com/dream. It's a free conversation. I can stay for Q&A as long as my hack. If you want to unmute to ask me a question on this, please feel free. Or you can ask in the chat and I'll read your question. I know when I first learned this, it was like, oh, how people hit goals it's not what I was doing to hit my goals. And, you know, if your goals are small enough, you can maybe do some of this sort of naturally, but as you start to set bigger goals and the bigger your life, you want your life to become, the more strategy goes into it, the more you're actually directing your mind how to think about it. And it's a discipline. It's not, you know, it's like yoga and fun, you know, it's sometimes at first like yoga's fun and then eventually you hit a level where it becomes a discipline, but that discipline brings you to an entirely different level of yoga. Same thing's true with meditation. It brings you to an entirely different level of practice. And that same thing is true with goal setting and with strategy, is it is a discipline. The more you practice it, the better you get at it and the better you can hit better levels of strategy with less effort over time. And so I know for me, it's made all the difference. We use this in our family. The way I teach it in the Master of You book and the way I teach it in the Awake Living course is you can apply this, you can have your family use this system. We use it for our family in order to hit our goals as a family. And as a result, my kid, she understands quite a bit about quarterly planning. She understands about goal setting and how to break it down into the habit level in order to hit her targets on time. And it makes, to me, it's like these are just huge, huge life skills for living a life that you're directing your life instead of, everything else, the job, the this, the that, directing you. Kim's asking, do you have access to this recording? Yeah, we will send the replay. And anyone else that this will be helpful to, please share it. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. I'll just give one last call for questions. Otherwise, we'll jettison on out of here. Comments, questions, feedback? Yeah, yoga vagabond. Who's this?
I'm in Italy at the moment. Hi. I've got a question for you. So, okay, so we dream big. What if we have like too many dreams and we kind of want to do one thing which is not necessarily totally linked to the other? What do we do with those big dreams which are like too many?
Yeah, exactly. Like this is where strategy starts to get more complex. So what the challenge is here, what's your name from Italy?
Hi, my name is Eva.
Eva. That becomes how you articulate that challenge. So how do I do this and do this, given that I only have this amount of resources? So one of the resources you all have the same amount of this resource is time. Right, we all have 24 hours in a day. Now, some of us are going to come up with a list of things that we can't do in that day. It's a weakness. We might not have as much control over time as we want. So all of a sudden, we're bringing up our critical issues. And what this does is it actually helps you refine what the goal is. Because you might find if two competing interests are so far out of alignment with each other, that at some point you could not attain either. You could sacrifice both by trying to overdo too much. So this is where the good strategy actually comes in, because you identify early on, like, oh, I can't do this and do that to the level that I want to do either. So then now now all of a sudden you have a much better question. So then the much better question is, given that I have a limited resource of time or limited resource of money or whatever the limited resource actually is, and I've identified that as a critical issue in achieving both goals, right? So given that I have this limited resource, which one do I want more? Or does one help me get the other? Or. So now you're simply asking better questions. And if you guys leave here with anything today, it's to ask yourself better questions and then reflect on them and chew on them and then turn them into better strategy. So what is the competing interest, Eva?
Well, there's quite a lot of things going on. I moved to Italy recently and I'm actually a yoga teacher and I love Ayurveda as well. So what happened, on the one hand, I'm doing yoga and teaching. On the other hand, I'm organizing sort of Ayurvedic courses with people from India. And on the third side, there's my partner who's into wine industry. And he's getting contacts here, and we might be working in sort of like wine and tourism on top, which would involve me as well in my language skills. I'm actually not from Italy originally, but I speak like Polish and now Italian and Spanish and a bit of Russian and English, and it means like, oh, we could have a job here, but I still want to carry on my yoga and I still want to do my Ayurveda, and then all of a sudden there's not enough hours in a day to do all of that.
What's the bigger goal? So is anyone else stuck on this where you've got like all these things kind of all over the place and it's like, how does it connect together? Because this is very common. When you back up, and this is where having a guide and having a coach is essential with hitting bigger life goals, you guys. Like trying to figure out this stuff alone will only get you so far, because our own thinking is cyclical and repetitive. The yogis call that samskaras. Like we all have our own thinking ruts. So what I'm not hearing in Eva's, in her goals is is the much bigger goal. So what is the much bigger goal? Is there a financial goal? Let's just start there. Or is
Not
there not?
really, not at the
Okay,
moment.
then is there an impact? So money doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you make money or don't make money. Okay.
At the moment, but it will, like, I'm aware that eventually the holiday will kind of end and I will have to have a proper job and earn proper money. At the moment, like, it's okay, we can stay here for 6 months, but afterwards we need to get a job, like earn money to pay for
Okay. So this brings up another thing, which is like the goal is really short term. So what I've learned over time from my mentors is that you actually want to build good strategy. You want at least a 3-year target. 5 years is too vague, it's too long, but 3 years helps you build good strategy down to that habit level. Right? So if you're like, oh, in 6 months I'll deal with that. Well, you want to deal with it now so that you're actually entrained for the 6 months after that. There's certain things you're doing now that are setting yourself up for later. Like all the things I've done, all the things I did from my mid 30s to my mid 40s set me up really sweet for 46, right? All those little things, because I could see a bigger goal. What I'm doing now is building it up for when I'm 50. Like I'm very, very clear on what kind of experience I want to be having at 50 years old, what kind of impact experience I want to be having, what kind of revenue experience I want the business to be having, what kind of family experience like that. So I'm building strategy. My milestones then from the 3-year down to what I want to have made happen by next year, that helps give me a sense. And then I can test the strategy. The strategy for this 3-year is the same as the strategy for the 1 year, you guys. It's just broken down into a more micro level. And that's why a lot of this stuff in Awake Living, it takes people about 2 years to understand how to do this, like quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter. But then if you make massive progress in the first quarter, you make massive progress in the first year, and then by the second year, it's actually an automated habit. And if you're working at the level of family, it's automated family habit. So for you need to talk with your partner about where are you going and what kind of income, what kind of lifestyle in very clear yet broad strokes where it's like, this is your lives together. It doesn't have to look anything like mine or Brandy's or Eileen's or Amy's, right? This is like yours.
Sure.
Guys, the more you own the specificity of your deeper dreams, like the better. Once you have that really clear, right, then you're at a level of starting to understand your bigger critical issues, right? So some of the issues might be like, oh, maybe the critical issue is like, how do we combine this love of wine and travel and wellness into a lifestyle business that helps us hit this revenue target and impact target where we're, maybe you have an impact target that you want to affect X number of lives. The more specific we get with that, you guys, goals need to be, the more specific they are, the more that you can actually see what the critical issues behind them are, the more you can know if you actually achieve them or not.
Fantastic.
Is that helpful?
That's really helpful, and that's good to actually sit down and plan together. Like at the moment it's just like all the things in my head and like, oh, am I doing the right thing? And actually you suggested something super simple. Just sit down and maybe get the opinion in more detail. We do it, but we just don't do it that longer.
It's not formalized, right? It's not formalized.
Like, oh, we sort of check in, like, oh, how are you doing? What do you think?
Yeah, no, this is, you guys, when I say it's a discipline, it's like, those of us who practice yoga or meditate, right? Like there's a way to do it. Like there's a way you were taught by your teacher to go to practice, to like approach, like you don't wear shoes on the yoga mat. You don't like rush in with a full belly to the yoga mat, right? Like there's ways that you approach the practice. Some of us chant, some of us sit for a minute, some of us center, some of us create an intention, and then we warm our body up, and then we start, moving and bending in certain ways, and then our practice will hit like the apex of it, and then we'll wind things down, and then we'll sit and we'll recalibrate and absorb the effects of the practice. That's a yoga practice. That's a discipline. Any discipline is the same that way. A soccer practice is the same. A violin practice is the same. You know, like when I played the clarinet, like you'd always start with the reed. Like, what's the condition of your reed? Does it need more moisture? You know, like, what do you need to do to make it so that you don't blow your reed 5 minutes into your practice? This strategic, you know, strategy to hit goals it's a practice. It's a learned discipline. I know I kind of blew through a lot here. It does take us a bit to learn it, but you can just book time and formalize it. Like, okay, every quarter we're going to sit down and we're going to hammer this out, and we're going to see exactly what quest are we on together. And it becomes, you know, the more we approach it, you know, it's like fire and water. Like, the more with the discipline and more with the water of like flow and joy, we start to live a life that's very, very deeply aligned. That's way less like random, way less wishful thinking, way less pipe dreams, and more of like, wow, we can make a lot more happen in a lot less time. And what happens then, you guys, is the skills, the assets, the resources, they start to become exponential. So that's why when I look at like what I'll be able to do in my 50s, it's going to be so much greater than I can do at 46. I have no doubt, because I'm actively building the skills, assets, resources in order to do that. Yeah. Yeah, and maybe it'd be helpful, Ava, to talk to one of our yoga health coaches. And if you fill out one of those dream conversations, you can, and they'll have some good ideas about career strategy as well.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Anyone else before we wrap up? We good? We're good. All right. Pleasure being with you all. I hope that uncovers some of the myth behind how to achieve goals on time. I'll just close in saying that I know for me, for a long time, I just wasn't holding myself accountable. You know, I would set a goal, but I wasn't holding myself accountable to the goal. And over time, that also is cured by this methodology where you're looking much more clearly on what are the lessons learned. And if a lesson learned is like, I set goals that I don't achieve, like that's something that there's something going on in the subconscious there. There's resistance, there's skills that you don't have, that you want to actually build those into your next strategy. So again, this is stuff that like I invested a lot in order to learn this, and it's paid back in spades. It is a discipline that I do quarterly, and you know, looking now at the year ahead is the time when I start to look at this, and both for my family and for the business, and how we do what we want to do, so we set ourselves up for an even bigger future. I hope it's been helpful. Good to be with you guys. Bye.